Sigue en sintonía de nuestra programación.
Está empezando el show del Dr. Roy Aranda, donde abordaremos temas sobre separación niños de padres, casos de violencia, traumas con los indocumentados, cómo resistir ante tiempos de pandemias. Llámanos en vivo al 1-888-900-2811, extensión 6, y haz tus propias preguntas al aire. ¡Comenzamos!
Okay, good evening, my dear Tribuna TV viewers. Buenas noches, queridos televidentes de la siempre famosísima Tribuna TV y mejorando cada día. Today is September 8, 2022. Estamos al 8 de septiembre 2022. We have a lot of things to talk about today. I think every time I have a program, I tell you I think it's the best ever, and you know maybe each program develops into the best ever. Who knows? But there's a lot in the agenda for today. Tenemos mucho para hablar hoy día, and it's a program that we are going to be focused on disasters. Vamos a tocar el tema de los desastres porque este año ha sido un horror. This year has been a horror in terms of natural disasters. We also are going to be doing a special tribute for 9/11, and I have a special guest for that. And I wanted to first off thank Oscar Luna, my producer. Oscar, si quieres dar un saludo. So that's Oscar in the background. He's the one responsible for producing the show, for all the slides, for the video, for the graphics, for the audio. This show would be non-existent without him. So I'm very grateful to Oscar, who actually has been my producer since the beginning of the show. So it's 4 years that I know Oscar. So we are recording the show. It's being recorded live on YouTube, and by tomorrow there will be a recording on, of course, on YouTube since it's being recorded live. Also on Tribuna TV's website, Vimeo, and other sources of electronic media. Okay, so el show se está grabado en YouTube y tendremos otras grabaciones ya para mañana. We'll have other recordings for tomorrow. As usual, I tell my guests, we have a lot of slides. Feel free to take photographs of the slides. Pueden sacar fotos de los slides o lo que les interesa, or wait for the recording and then you can take screenshots. I know there's a lot of material and some of it will be nice for you, to save, and you can sort of digest it at your pace later on. So with that said, the show for today is called When Disaster Strikes, How Can We Think About the Unthinkable? And let me just give an initial shout out to Dr. Peter Canaris, who's my co-host in many ways and my consultant. But I'm not sure that I've ever paid enough homage to him for being really the resource in terms of coming up with the names. I don't know how he does it. He has a gift for coming up with the names. So I tell him this is what I need, and he gives me the name. So, Don Oscar, por favor, ¿me puede poner el primer slide? Okay, so here we have When Disaster Strikes, How Can We Think About the Unthinkable? My consultant and guest, Peter Canaris. And I have a special guest, Terry Ravella, and I'll get to him momentarily. So in terms of the introduction and what the purpose is of this show for today, we have been ravaged by severe storms, wildfire, flooding, droughts, heat waves, tornadoes. You might as well add earthquakes to that too. The impact is unprecedented, not only here in the United States, but globally as climate changes wreak havoc. In this show with my guest and consultant, Dr. Peter Canaris, We will focus on disaster recovery, the impact in our lives, how adults, children, communities are affected, emotional repercussions, coping strategies, and recommended psychological intervention. I have a special dedication to 9/11. Carrie Rivella, who now lives in Las Vegas, was a captain for New York State Environmental Police and was on site when both towers collapsed. He was intimately involved in rescue efforts for several days at Ground Zero and weeks to follow, and commanding rescue efforts for several days at Ground Zero and weeks to follow, years after that. He said that it was like Armageddon. I maintained a friendship with Terry for 21 years because I met him shortly after the 9/11. And he has been a guest on this show before. He joins us today to remember 9/11 on his 21st anniversary. I'm dedicating the show to all my viewers over the past 4 years as we mark the 4th anniversary on August 30, 2022. Oscar, puedes sacar a slide. Let me just share that Peter was with me on August 30, 2018, when I started the show. It was the beginning. I was doing the show once a month back then. Slowly, it expanded to twice a month. And I think that today is my 77th show, if I'm sort of correct. So it's probably been an average of close to 20 a year. So August 30 marked the 4th anniversary of my show. And I wanted to give a big thank you to Peter, who's been with me from the start and is here again today, in many ways, co-host, consultant, and probably will continue with me as long as I am able to, maintain the show going and active. I've had other guests that were superb. It would be really difficult for me to, off the cuff, mention all of them, but I know Dr. Ani Kalajian has been a repeat guest, Dr. Lenny Davidman, NISPA president, Dr. Barbara Katipanakis, has been a guest on my show probably 3 times. Dina Abbey, Dr. Dina Abbey was a guest twice. I've had several others, so apologies to my guests that have made more than one appearance for not mentioning you. But all my guests were special. And I'm giving a shout out to all of my guests throughout the 4 years. Thank you so much for making this show what I think is a successful outreach. My efforts to reach out to the community, provide a service for the community, for people who don't have a voice, for people who need education, for people to need a little bit of backup, for people to need some support in knowing what's out there. That's been my effort for 4 years. It's been something to really try to help the viewers, to empower them. That's been my goal. Peter, any comments before we go to the tribute?
Well, Roy, only that it's been a pleasure for me over these 40 years to contribute in whatever small way to the show. My passion over my career really has been providing public education about psychological topics to the public. And I think your show over these 4 years has been a wonderful vehicle for that, even reaching some people that maybe don't normally have access to getting that kind of a message. So having been part of it and continuing to be to this point, it's been an honor and a pleasure.
All right. Thank you, Peter. I did want to give a shout out to another special person. A student of mine. I teach at John Day College of Criminal Justice. I'm faculty there. I teach psychology and the law. And I had a student who worked on a special research project last semester. She did such an absolutely wonderful job that I submitted her research paper to New York State Psychological Association for consideration of receiving a social justice award that was named after my name. And she right now presently is my teaching assistant, and she is instrumental in helping me and has absolutely wonderful ideas. So not Celine. This show, I'm giving a shout out to you, not Celine. Thank you for your involvement with me at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Oscar, por favor, el slide número 2. So this slide, remembering 9/11, and to honor my friend of 21 years, Terry Ravella. There's a photo of Terry on the left, and here's a couple of photos that many of you have already seen. I don't want to belabor all the horrors and the nightmares of 9/11. My intention is really to keep the memory going. Like I wanted you to see some of the things that are out there. The beacon of lights right after the tower. This symbolized where the tower stood. I used to drive by on the New Jersey side, and almost ironically, I would look at my clock, and there was 9/11 as I'm driving. The clock is 9/11, and I'm looking over and I see the beams, and I said, that's got to be more than a coincidence. There has to be a power greater than us that's keeping me reminded, something special, something so special that happened. Por favor, Oscar, el slide número 3. Here's a few more photos for you. This is from across the river. That's what the beautiful, majestic Twin Towers used to look like. And this is the gorgeous building that stands where it is now on the right. And I do want to say what a wonderful legacy many people instrumental in remembering 9/11 have done with a museum and a memorial on Ground Zero. And I really recommend people to look into it. If you're unable to go there, you can see the museum. There's so many photos that are out there. You can be part of it. You can make donations. You can really help in terms of the education and keeping it going. We need to keep this alive. We are in a lot of trouble worldwide for many reasons, not just the natural disasters, but there's a lot of problems that humanity is facing. And we need to really be sensitive to who we are, what we are, and the kinds of legacy that we really want to leave behind for our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren going forward. They're going to be inheriting the kinds of things that we leave behind for them. So please put, Oscar, por favor, saca eso y pon el 4. So shortly after 9/11, I wrote this firefighter song. I'm not going to read it. I just wanted to point it out. Viewers are welcome to take a photo of it or a screenshot tomorrow, the firefighter song. I was inspired to write it. It's difficult for me to read it because pretty much every single time that I read it, I'm on the verge of being driven to tears. So I'm not going to do that. So I'm just putting it up. Oscar, puedes sacar el slide. So without further ado, Terry, it's on you. Please feel free. The show, you are the special guest for today. Let me just add one more thing. That Terry, as instrumental as he was on Ground Zero, had what many people call survivor guilt. Why did he survive where others did not? And I recall him telling me that he would go over a bridge, and there was one time he thought to himself, why don't I just go off the bridge? And he told me that, he shared that with me. I told him the reason is that it's not your time. You have a very special thing to do. You have to tell the story. You have to be there to promote it. You have to be there to give us your wisdom and to share with us and to keep this memory going. So you are a very special person. And I told him that, and I'm delighted to say he's still with us. And he took my advice. So Terry, please, Oscar, puedes sacar el slide. Terry, take it away. Whatever you'd like to say, this is on you now. Okay?
Yeah, Doc. I'm going to be somewhat brief. I'll be a few minutes if that's okay.
Sure.
As the anniversary gets closer, I get deeper in thought about it. It's something that we should never, ever forget as human beings, period. Not just Americans, because there was over 90 different foreign countries in the Trade Center that lost people. And we need to reflect on that and not forget. I drove down the West Side Highway. The North Tower was on fire. The second tower had just got hit. And I pulled up and went into the command post in the North Tower. And they asked for all state assets. I was the captain in charge of all the state environmental police in New York City. And our job was to respond to any hazardous materials incident within the confines of the city, as well as other duties, regular police duties. But our expertise is on hazardous materials. And the trade centers, when they came down, were the biggest hazardous waste site in world history, even bigger than Bhopal. So I drive down the West Side Highway. I go to North Tower. I see the commander, Richie Scherer, who's the OEM commissioner. He sends me into the South Tower to help get people out of the PATH trains and the 109 train. And I was in the mezzanine between Building 7 and Building 2 when it came down around me and trapped me, and my officer, Jeffrey Cox, who put his arm around my shoulder and said, "Goodbye, Captain." And we thought we were going to not make it out alive. There was about 20 of us all together behind a cement pillar. And the fire department, I believe it was either 118 or 114, opened up a hatch and got us all out. I was out 1 minute when I went to Vessian West. It's where the North Tower stood, and it collapsed after 1 minute. I was out. So I survived both towers. The firemen come running from the 93 bombing garage, come running yelling, "It's coming down," and grabbed me around the waist, and we went over the Jersey barrier and landed on the West Side Highway. And the only thing that saved us was a girder between a fire truck and the Jersey barrier. Sorry about the background noise there, guys. And I remember distinctly when I was trapped, thinking about the men in the Arizona and in Nevada and the other ships at Pearl Harbor. And as I reflect more as time goes by, I think about those gentlemen that survived that are all dead now. And their living history about what happened that day is gone forever. It's only written in a few books, in a few movies. 9/11 has one movie that I know of. And if we don't do something about taking care of our country and our fellow man, we're going to have another 9/11. And that was very hard for me that day, because I was wondering why at the age of 50 I was alive and 49 rather, and why I was alive and they were all killed, young men, young women, children, to the tune of 2977. And I remember helping taking out some of those bodies. I also remember when before the towers fell, about 150 people jumped to their deaths. They chose their own way out. And I'll never forget that, Doc. I remember taking you around and showing you the big holes in the ground and steel being cut. And we were still taking out bodies. And just never forget. I've been your friend for 21 years because you know exactly what I'm talking about and what I mean. And you actually helped me with my PTSD and the survivor's guilt, where, I was driving over a bridge and thought I should jump. I had a few thoughts of suicide, feeling that guilt complex. And I remember you saying to me how you believed that I was here for a bigger purpose. And now I realize as time has gone on, that I am here for that bigger purpose, is to be a living historical person for what happened that day. And if you go in the museum, or anybody, and they go down into the first floor, there's computers set up. And if you punch my name in, Terry Ravella, you'll get the history of where I was and what I did that day. And that's in there in perpetuity. So that's just a brief introduction for me. And I don't know really what else to say. As it gets closer, it gets to be a little stressful, you know that. So, hello.
Well, Terry, thank you so much. I mean, I did want to make this a dedication to 9/11, because I never forget, and we're pretty close. You know, it's September 8th. We're only 3 days away, and to our friendship. You know, I know that like you've suffered a lot after that. I really didn't want to belabor it, and I just wanted to dedicate this particular show to you and to the viewers who stuck with me for 4 years with my TV show. So thanks so much, Terry, and I'll touch base with you soon, as I always do, okay?
Dr. Peter and Dr. Aranda, you're doing a great job, both of you. I appreciate you. Dr. Aranda, I love you to death.
Thank you. The feeling is reciprocated.
You're well, Terry.
Bye-bye.
You're well.
All right.
Bye, Doc. Bye, Dr.
Bye-bye.
Peter.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
All right, Peter, we're going to get started with a rundown of some of the disasters that I think are really significant. A lot of photos to make it, more captivating. And then we'll talk a little bit about the impact, how people are affected, and some of the remediations kinds of things. And hopefully, as we always strive to do, to leave some sort of a message for the viewers that there's always light at the end of the tunnel. There's always an opportunity at resilience, at post-traumatic growth, at going forward, and we just really have to push for it. Okay, so that's sort of like where I would like to end the show today, not just focused on oh my God. That's not my style. Okay, so por favor, Oscar, el slide número 6. So here we have a rundown of the types of disasters, pretty much floods, heat waves, droughts, wildfires, tornadoes. Oh, wait a second, I jumped. I'm sorry. Okay, natural disasters. Oh, no puedo poner el 5, my mistake. Oscar, el 5. I jumped ahead. Disregard 6 right now. Viewers, erase it from your memory. Okay, el 5. All right, these are natural disasters. I think I've covered pretty much most of them here. We've had a lot of wildfires, some earthquakes, a lot of floods. Hurricanes, we've been blessed by having a really soft season. Tornadoes, there have been. Blizzards, well, that's sort of like in the winter. I don't think it's been a big issue. Let's see what this winter brings. Cyclones, monsoons, heat waves again. It's been horrific. Tsunamis. This pretty much covers a compendium. Oscar, por favor, regresa ahora al 6. Go back to 6 now. Okay, sorry about that. So here on 6, we have disasters 2022. Floods, heat waves, droughts, wildfires, tornadoes. Summer 2022 set records. I've given you some indications. Climate change, worsened weather conditions led to unprecedented and even catastrophic results. And by catastrophic, I mean, life and death. We've had deaths, and we've had people losing, houses and all sorts of things, and serious injuries. Storms caused by the Pearl River's overflow, leading to flooding in Jackson. Jackson has been in the news a lot, leaving a lack of drinkable water, boil water notice since late July. More than 80 million people are under flood watches from Alabama to Maine. That's a recent statistic, September 5. It's pretty recent. Flash flood watches extend to New England. More than 80 million people are affected in Birmingham, Atlanta, Nashville, Louisville, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, New York, and Boston. And I gave you a photo of that. You can see the green path that's been carved out pretty much by these flash floods. Okay, so puedes sacarlo. Y ponme el número 7. Peter, I'm just going to go through photos. And then when we get to the substantive part is where you'll chime in for me, okay?
Really? Yes.
So this is a picture as an example on 7. ¿Ya está el 7? Okay, here you have the Montana flooding. You can see, for instance, a picture from Montana. Expanding underneath, expanding drought conditions, increased fire risks. This is a photo from California, August 31. Now we just had Terry Ravella, who's in California. And California has been the site of wildfires and droughts and heat waves. It's really, really sad. But this is a photo. I just wanted to bring it to your attention from fairly recently, August 31. Puedes sacarlo, por favor, Oscar, el número 8. For the viewers, I just wanted to point out the different kinds of disasters, what some of them look like, and the impact. The 2022 tornado season was expected to break records. Going back to 2021, there were 1,376 tornadoes in the United States compared to 1,075 in 2020. We're waiting to see what the numbers are once 2022 is over, but they're already expecting a record-breaking year. Tornado Alley states: Iowa, Kansas, Minnesota, Nebraska, North Dakota, Oklahoma, South Dakota, and Texas. On August 28th, 5 tornadoes touched down in the Twin Cities. Here's a photo of Kansas. No wonder the movie The Wizard of Oz, Dear Dorothy went to Kansas. It shouldn't be a surprise. Look at that hurricane. So that's recent Kansas this year. Oscar, puedes sacar el slide y ponme por favor, el slide 9. Slide 9. Like I said, hurricanes, fortunately, thank God, the hurricane season, we were actually expecting a bad hurricane season. It's running behind schedule. It's not necessarily over. Usually it peaks like around August, September. So we're really behind schedule, but it's not necessarily over yet. There are hurricanes that are forming, and yet to be seen is what will become of them as they move towards the mainland, or they don't make it. They move out to sea. So certainly we'll keep an eye on it. Earthquakes. 3 earthquakes hit off the coast of Rhode Island in one weekend. That was on May 15. We had a magnitude of 6.9 earthquake, Central Mid-Atlantic Ridge. That was Sunday, September 4, 2022. So certainly we're being hit. 6.9 is certainly a hurricane, a tornado of an earthquake of large impact. Okay. And just very recently, we had a 6.8 earthquake. It wasn't here, but I did want to point it out to you because it was in the news as of September 4. This was the earthquake in southwestern China. It was 6.8. The government agencies reported at least 65 deaths. I gave you a couple of photos there for you to see the outcome. Full extent of the damage is unclear. It's very recent. I mean, it's only like 4 days later, so yet to be seen what will be the outcome. I did want to mention that globally, we've had a lot of flooding and a lot of other major disasters. Okay, so it would have been very, very time consuming and labor intensive for the show put a lot of these photos. So I'm just giving you, a little bit of a taste of the photos, mostly U.S. because we're here in the U.S., but recognizing that globally has been horrific for this year as well. And all of the scientists are attributing much of this to climate change. Oscar, puedes sacar este slide, el número 9, y poner el número 10. Okay, droughts as a result of climate change. The drought now is the driest in 2 decades. Wow. 20 years. This is the driest spell that we've had. This is what the land looks like as it's caking again. A photo from California recently taken. Now, some of you may live in Long Island or New York, and you might be aware of this. If not, I'll bring it to your attention that parts of Long Island, I live in Long Island in Suffolk County, so does Peter, are experiencing severe drought conditions along with other counties in New York. All of Long Island as of September 1 is in a severe drought condition. Over the past month, data from NOAA shows that New York has gone from 47.5% of the state being abnormally dry to 76.1%. It's a huge, statistically significant increase. Long Island, New York City, parts of the Hudson Valley are in severe drought. 14.5 million people in the state are affected by drought conditions. Now, mind you, I'm giving you data from New York. It's not, just New York. We've had drought conditions many states across the United States. Okay, so depending on where you are, look up on the internet, inform yourself, get some information, and you'll see pretty much what's been going on, where your state or your area or your county stands. Oscar, puedes sacarlo y ponerme el número 11, slide 11. So this is what most lawns look like where I'm at. I wanted to give credit to Jackie, who provided me this photo of what normally is a very well manicured, well kept property. And you can see the yellow. I mean, it's yellow. This is pretty much wherever you go. This is what all lawns look like. It's all, yellow, yellow. So basically, I guess that somehow the climate figured out that I was doing a show today on disasters, and it decided to rain. So guess what? We had like some heavy rain on September 6th, the day after Labor Day, right here in Long Island. It rained heavily. But as much as we thought, oh wow, what a nice rainfall, it really wasn't all that much, even though it looked like, wow, it's like a nice rain. It ranged from approximately 0.33 inches to a slightly over 1 inch amounts in certain parts of Long Island. So really, it wasn't all that much to do. Obviously better than nothing. I mean, it's great to have it. But does that mean the drought is over? No, not even close, not even close. A single rainstorm will provide maybe some temporary relief. You're going to need a lot of soaking rains for several months to end the drought. And by soaking rains, that means where it drenches and it really seeps into the soil and really wets the soil deep down. That's what we're going to need. We are definitely not out of a drought condition. So, puedes sacar el slide. So, Peter, any comments before we go to the? Oh no, Oscar, por favor, el número 12. We have one more slide with the photo, and then we'll get into some other important slides.
Yeah, just one.
We've had record-shattering heat waves, like I said. They've made records in central and northeast U.S. Tenemos el 12, ¿verdad? Okay. Record heat surging across the U.S. Look, 120 degrees. I mean, look, 134 all the way California, 121 Midwest, 120, and look what it's been on the East. I mean, we're 111, 110, 110, 113. Anyway, you want to look at it, Connecticut, Delaware, Massachusetts, look at the numbers on the far right, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Vermont. I wanted to point that out to you for you to see, the viewers, what it's been like. And this is record heat surging across the entire United States. Okay, one more slide, por favor. El 13, saca eso y pone el 13. To my viewers, this is really more intended to be an educational slide. It's precisely because of the incredible heat. I mean, things like hurricanes, obviously there's things to do to protect yourself. Tornadoes, things to do, earthquakes. All of these disasters, some of them you're able to prepare ahead of time. Some of them you have no warning. You need to do the best that you can to protect yourself, your family, your loved ones. But heat is difficult because people tend to ignore it. They're not that aware of it. And you need to remain hydrated. Being dehydrated is very easy. And it's so easy when you have like a heat wave or you have like a couple of days of temperature reaching near or close to 100 degrees, that if you're not aware of it, you can go out and get dizzy and have actually a heat stroke. So I wanted to give you an indication, viewers, because we're still, not over this. Be aware of what some of the symptoms are. You need to really stay hydrated. Symptoms: throbbing headaches, dizziness, lightheadedness, sweating, lack of sweating despite heat, red, hot, dry skin, muscle weakness, cramps, nausea, vomiting, accelerated heartbeat, rapid shallow breathing. Please be aware of this, not only for yourselves, but for your friends, neighbors, and loved ones. Some people are far more vulnerable, elderly people who have medical conditions. This can become life-threatening very quickly. So I wanted you to be aware of that. Puedes sacar a slide. Peter, that said, we're going to move into emotional reactions and what psychologists do. Any comments on all of these, the slides and, all the photos and all of that?
Only, Roy, that, I think in totality, as you think of all of the various aspects and the different conditions that you're describing, it can feel overwhelming. Just to be aware of it. And, we hear it in the news every day. There seems to be some form of weather-related disaster that we hear about just about daily at some part of the country, certainly the world. And it's something that creates, I think, for people a lot of anxiety and a sense of, this impending doom. What's going to be next? So hopefully, we'll get into talking about some of that and some ways of thinking and dealing with it.
All righty. So we're going to go on to some of the slides that I think are relevant in terms of the impact to the viewers, children, adults, and so forth, and what we as psychologists and, of course, other mental health specialists have to offer. So, Oscar, what I'll do is I'll go over the slides, ask Oscar to take it down, and then you'll go on point, okay? So, por favor, Oscar, el número 14. So, emotional disorders encountered after disasters. Some of these are actually formal diagnoses. They don't have to be formal diagnoses. Let me be clear about it. You don't have to have a formal diagnosis in order to have a problem. You can have what's called a subclinical diagnosis. You can still be suffering from depression, anxiety, but you go to a psychologist, a psychiatrist, and they don't provide a diagnosis. That doesn't mean you're not suffering. PTSD is usually the leader. It's usually the one that's most salient, the one that most people are affected by. I know that I've spoken about PTSD on many other occasions on the show. Major depression, specific phobias. It could be a fear of going outside, fear like being in a car, fear of going across a bridge, like maybe Terry was mentioning that maybe there'll be an earthquake, it'll collapse, you can't go somewhere, you can't drive because you'll be in some way hit by another car, you'll collapse if you go out in the heat. So those are the kinds of phobias. And then a phobia, well, you're gonna avoid something. Panic disorders is where it's so egregious that, like, your heart starts beating rapidly, you feel like you're going to pass out, collapse, and faint and land on the ground. Adjustment disorders are milder. They're milder. It could be depression, could be conduct, changes in behaviors. It could be anxiety. It could be a mix. Neurocognitive disorders, traumatic brain injury, for instance, like somebody who may have been in an earthquake and fell, had a fall, or debris, from debris hitting you, and you got a blow to the head. Substance use disorders, people are relying on perhaps prescribed medication, prescribed legal medication to cope with pain or to cope with anxiety, and they start popping it. They start popping pills to overcome the pain, to overcome the anxiety, to the point that it becomes a substance use disorder and or reliance on alcohol, marijuana, other kinds of drugs, or even stronger kinds of medications to help cope. And that can become serious. Typical symptoms. This covers, I think, a fairly comprehensive exposure, the intrusive thoughts and flashbacks that you typically see in PTSD, bad dreams, distress when reminded of the trauma. So you could have been in a flood and you're outside in a car now, and all of a sudden starts pouring rain, and your heart starts beating rapidly, and you get scared. Intense physical reactions, heart palpitates, rapidly. That would be an example. Loss of interest in activities. You just don't feel like doing anything. I have many patients, they're telling me that they're unmotivated. They have no motivation. Labor Day holiday weekend, the extended Labor Day holiday weekend, I would say that a sizable, well over half, probably closer to 3/4 of my patients stayed in. They didn't want to go out. They were unmotivated. It wasn't just fear. It wasn't just fear of more traffic, people doing more riskier driving, drinking driving, exposure to those kinds of things, as well as the exposure to possible contaminants. So we're up to four viruses. We have the BA5 COVID-19, monkeypox, polio virus, and also as a result of the mosquito season and so much of the floodings and the heat, we're having West Nile's virus back on the rise. Flu season's around the corner, and I anticipate other mutations, COVID-19, that are stemming from BA5 as well. So certainly dangerous, but many of the people, besides all of that, they have aches and pains. They don't feel well. They were just unmotivated to go out. Disturbed sleep. That's very typical. Easily startled. Anything that's like a noise, a banging, a loud sound. Telephone suddenly rings. It's loud. You're sleeping at night. You hear something. Feeling guilty. This is what Terry was saying. Guilt feelings that he made it and others didn't, and why him and not others. Depression. In children, they're afraid to separate parents. Regression. They start behaving like younger children. Fear of the dark, pretty typical. Fear of sleeping alone, pretty typical. Behavioral changes, they become maybe more isolated, more withdrawn, or more aggressive, more belligerent, more hostile, more risks. Mood changes, ups and downs. So like they can seem sort of okay, and anything triggers like anger, or all of a sudden anxiety or depression. Enuresis, they're having changes in bowel movement, more bedwetting, for instance. Physical complaints, very typical. Changes in school performance. This is something that parents should really be monitoring, because this is something that's very significant. When your child starts experiencing changes in school performance, something is there. Doesn't mean it was a disaster, but something is there. Something is going on in their lives that's resulting in the changes in school performance. Puedes sacar a slide. Peter, I said a mouthful, so please take it away.
Yeah, what I would add to this in my role as a couples and sex therapist, I see the impact on relationships where there's a loss, the increase in sexual dysfunction, a loss of libido, how it affects a couple, how it affects a marriage, leading to greater relational discord, conflict, arguments, etc. And then, as you were mentioning also, Roy, when the problem is being manifested with the children, that adds also great stress within the family and to the couple. And sometimes increased arguments, a feeling of hopelessness, not knowing what to do, having difficulty in accessing help, all ratcheting up and potentiating the stress. So these are other manifestations that I see beyond the individual that affects the couple, the family system involved. And it's, you could see how it's almost like a rock in a pond, the ripple effect, how systemically it reaches out from one person to the other in that family and friendship system.
Well, to the extent, as an example, that the primary caretaker, the father or the mother, are injured or unable to work, and there's loss of income, or they have to relocate because the house is damaged. The children are relying on stability, on their parents. And very young children, the world is sort of like a magical place. Why do you think we have all these cartoons and movies with children where there's monsters and dragons and all sorts of things? Because that's the type of life, that's the type of world that children live in. It's a magical world in many ways, and they're reassured by their parents. And when they lose that, when they see that mommy's crying, or we're in the hospital, or daddy's sick, they worry. And also, I would add that there's probably some sort of a guilt feeling as well, like, did I do something to bring this on? Or how come I didn't do enough to protect? Or why didn't I do enough to make sure that, like, my mommy or daddy are okay? So this is something I think is very, very typical and very frequently seen in children. And it depends on the chronological age. And mind you, viewers, it's not just about chronological age. It's about mental age and maturity. You can have a 10-year-old that's super, sharp and sort of like parent-like and assumes more of a role with other siblings. And you can have a 15-year-old that's more childlike. So the chronology is only part of it, really, the mental age and what they're doing. And a problem as well is that when a child is really doing well and assumes that role of being an added caretaker, it puts an added burden on that poor child. That's unfair. It's unfair to that child, because then all of a sudden you're looking to that child to perform parenting skills when it should fall on the parent. Anything to add to that, Peter, before we go to the next slide?
Or just briefly, I think it's worth mentioning the impact on older adults, because older adults very often who are dealing with issues of isolation and loneliness under these kinds of circumstances. The primary example, of course, being the recent pandemic and how that increased isolation and the issue of loneliness and depression and anxiety for older adults, particularly if older adults are in facilities like skilled nursing facilities and places like that. They were quarantined and shut off and couldn't have that kind of social support that we're learning more and more, that the social support is so critical to psychological and emotional well-being. So older adults have been another class of individuals that have suffered specifically and greatly.
Let me add to that as well, Peter, that the older adults are less technologically skilled than their children and far less than their grandchildren. So the lack of technology, being more old-fashioned, show me a phone that looks like a phone, don't give me a phone that like I've got a million gadgets and things like that. That also increases their isolation, because if they're at home for any of a number of reasons, either because of physical limitations and or because of any sort of COVID-related distancing or other distancing from not being well, the lack of technological ability and skills is an added factor that increasingly isolates them.
So, Roy, is you suggesting that's the reason I have my 9-year-old grandson coming over to help me figure out my iPad?
Of course. Eventually children are going to be born with an iPad, and who knows what it'll be built in. Already have it built in. But for real, it's amazing how young children are. As young, I mean, I see 3-year-olds. Yeah. And they are already, doing stuff with play phones, real phones, not even play phones. It's incredible how quickly they are really learning the skills. But there's a risk involved there too, not so much related to this particular show, but parents need to be aware when you have sort of what looks like emancipating young children, so technologically gifted, that you, the parents, have to monitor who on earth they are talking to, involved with, because there is a lot of bullying, trolling, and people that are out there that are just trying to do harm to these kids. And it's not just pedophiles and other people like that, but it's people that are trying to steal information. And, like the cartoon that says, "Ma, what's your social security number?" I mean, that's a typical cartoon, but it's real. It's realistic, and parents need to really monitor what their kids are doing, who they talk to, what they're doing in terms of Zoom meetings or any type of education that's done virtually, and whatever contact they're having. Not the least of which, there's a lot of bullying to be aware of that's being done virtually with potentially horrific consequences. Okay. Oscar, por favor, el número 15. So here I'm sharing for the viewers some, typical symptoms, typical psychological interventions. It starts at the very beginning. It's crisis intervention. You want to make sure that somebody's not bleeding to death and is able to breathe. There's life. There's some things that need to be tended to immediately. That's not the domain of the psychologist. That's your rescue workers, your medical people. They have to take over at that point. Emotional first aid is something that psychologists and other experts in mental health do. This is the trauma that people exposed to disaster initially, loss of a house, due to a flood, due to an earthquake, loss of lives, injuries, and so forth. And they're just an absolute shock. So this is where emotional first aid kicks in. And then we have some traditional tried and true psychological techniques. I only gave you a handful here. Relaxation training. There's many different forms of relaxation therapy. Biofeedback, meditation. I left out a lot. This is very, very brief. I've mentioned this on other shows before. And Peter, you'll feel free to elaborate. Self-improvement courses. I have many patients. They're on the internet. It's wonderful now what you can do on the internet. You take courses, internet. Some of these are free, or you can download the apps, or they're very inexpensive. Stress management, again, stress management apps. Children, I already mentioned, keep age-specific needs in mind. When you're working with a 5-year-old, it's not going to be the same as working with a 15-year-old. Develop resilience. Peter, I'll let you talk about that a little bit more. The ability to withstand hardship, the ability to bounce back. It's like that umbrella that you carry when it's raining, only it's built in. It's inside of you, and you don't actually have to open up the umbrella. Post-traumatic growth, again, it's what you've learned, the skills that you've developed, stemming from our life. In our entire lives, we face traumatic events in adversity, and it should be some sort of a growth learning experience. It doesn't mean, I mean, there are negatives. Unfortunately, some people don't learn. Some people go into crisis mode. Some people abuse drugs and alcohol and medication. So it's hard to develop post-traumatic growth and distress tolerance if your style is one of giving up and moving into maladaptive, counterproductive, behaviorally inappropriate kinds of solutions. And recognize the need to seek professional care if you need. There's nothing, we're out there. We want to help you. We want to work with people. We don't want you to feel, especially some of the things, when people are talking really listless, like, I don't really know that I want to be here like this. This is horrible, blah, 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 very quiet. Concerns about hurting oneself and or others. This is really significant where you need to seek professional help. Puedes sacar el slide, Peter?
Yeah, well, just to comment a little further on the notion of resilience, Roy. We've done a lot of work at the American Psychological Association on the topic of resilience. And one of the things that we talk about is how sometimes people think resilience is purely this inborn quality or trait that you have it or you don't, you're born with it or you're not. And we've come to appreciate that resilience can be learned. It's a learned skill, it's a learned ability, and there are a number of ways of going about that. Just to mention some of them, one is focusing on making connections socially. All right, getting support for yourself from other people, being involved in that way, giving support to others. We also see how helping others becomes so helpful to you in developing your own resilience. Another aspect is avoiding pessimism. When something terrible happens, it's understandable to feel pessimistic about life, about expectations, to resist falling into that trap and not overgeneralizing from one bad event, now not painting the world black, not assuming everything will be bad, but seeing it in a more contained, specific way. Another aspect of resilience is learning to accept change. Human beings, we like to keep things the same. We feel good when everything is reliable and consistent and we can predict. Life doesn't always give us that kind of opportunity. Change happens all the time, whether we're perceiving it or not. Things are different now. We have to be able to look toward a greater acceptance of that and how it's normal for things to continue to change. What else can you do? You can begin by taking small actions. Sometimes it feels like, I have to climb this mountain. Instead, let me take little hills. Let me take it a little bit at a time and just work on it today and let it flow into tomorrow. And over time, I begin to see progress. Another element of importance is, is staying engaged. Okay, one of the things that tend to happen for us is that we look to withdraw. A bad thing happens, I want to crawl into my shell, put the covers over my head, and drop out from participation. Having a day of that, 2 days of that is okay. I don't want that to become a pattern. I want to be able to remind myself I must stay engaged with life, with people, with activity. Then the bad thing happens, and one of the things that's hard to appreciate is that it becomes what I call an unwanted opportunity to learn. No one invites or desires for a terrible thing or a bad event to happen in our lives. When it does, very often there's something I can learn. And if I could take some useful learning away from this, maybe there's something positive that can happen as a result of that. Another element is what's called trusting your instincts. All right. When you feel that there isn't control, sometimes you begin to feel like, well, I can't trust my own judgment. I can't trust my instincts on that. And I encourage people to look back on their lives at how many times they've had a good sense, how many times they've overcome an adverse circumstance, to be able to remember that. And I sometimes use the expression, go to school on your history. Look back at how you've coped and what's been useful to you, and be encouraged by that you're going to get through this as well. Keeping a perspective without overgeneralizing, as we said once again, from the negative, allowing yourself to stay hopeful. And sometimes holding on to a hope is difficult when it's so dark and when something very bad has happened in your life. But being able to find hope again tends to be another sign of becoming more resilient. And finally, focusing in on taking care of yourself and maybe taking care of others, exercising, eating well, being careful with alcohol, not using medications or drugs of any kind in excess. And also a tool that I like to advocate for people is writing. Being able to write your feelings, write your thoughts. Sometimes it's magical when you've got a negative thought rolling through your head and ruminating. Just by being able to write it, it allows that release. And you can examine it, and we'll, in a few minutes, I think we'll talk about how we can begin to think more rationally and more constructively about those thoughts and guide them in a better direction.
Okay, so that's the next slide, Peter. Some of the things that you already said. Oscar, por favor, el 16. So here we have, some thoughts on staying healthy. How we think, what Peter was talking about, rational thinking, problem solving, acceptance, not resignation. I mentioned that about like patients who become unmotivated, they give up. Accept something and then work on what you have to do to modify or correct your thinking to move in a direction that goes at least forward. You want to go forward, not backward. You don't want to get stuck either. Things that calm the mind, prayer for people who believe and or are religious, meditation, mindfulness, the deep breathing, relaxation exercises, caring for our bodies. This is something that we all have to do: nutrition, exercise, stretching, walking within whatever abilities you have, given whatever limitations may be there medically. Dancing would be another thing that you might be able to do. Returning to medical care. Many people were not following their appointments with doctors or going to seek medical care during COVID. Many still got used to it and still aren't doing it. There may be other reasons. They don't have insurance or financially it might be difficult for you. But you need to keep that in mind. That's part of staying healthy. What feeds the soul? Here's the soul, meaning you internally, what the sum total of everything you are. Expressions of gratitude, helping others, volunteering. You can do that virtually. You don't have to actually be in person, face to face to do that. Feeling love, religious activities, if you are so inclined. Appreciating nature. There's another one to focus on, slide 17, and then we'll stop. 17, por favor, Peter.
Yes.
Ya está. Some activities to pursue. We focused on this on other shows. Taking photos. I love to take photos. Relationships, what Peter was saying. Reaching out to others, reconnecting. We were distanced a lot. So many of us during the COVID. It's been going on, for quite a while. So it's been going on for over a year and a half now. It's been 2.5 years. Yeah.
2.5, yeah.
TV, different types of entertainments, educational shows, videos, comedy, less negative news, because that can just add to your level of trauma. Pets are gifts. I mean, I'm definitely a pet person. Music, hobbies, develops a new hobby, resume things that you stopped doing, reading, cooking, online courses, re-explore yourself with photos, memorabilia, look at the photos from the past, stuff that you did, whatever you have. The moment that you start re-exploring that, it becomes part of your present all of a sudden. Education, resilience, what we talked about, growth after trauma and adversity, and again, knowing when to seek professional assistance. Puedes sacar el slide. Peter, just for me to add, with many of my patients, I instruct them to do things like keep a headache diary, keep a diary of nightmares, keep a diary of some of their thoughts, keep records, focus on things, monitor when they go out, what it is that they do. And I certainly do a lot of that checking myself, but I have many of them engaged in this kind of homework assignment so that they're developing a necessary skill in engaging in self-monitoring. And with the self-monitoring is the opportunity to not only learn more about it, more of the characteristics, but like being able to implement change. What was it that you were able to do that got over it? And usually the monitoring in and of itself has a positive factor of bringing about change. So, Peter, I'll leave it up to you before we go into our closing.
Yeah, just a comment, Roy, on thinking and how when we're under stress, again, when certainly if there's a disaster or things have happened in our lives that are terribly upsetting, it is very normal and natural that one of the effects of that stress leads to distorted thinking, or what sometimes is called irrational thinking. And it's important to spot that and to be able to work on changing that. What are some of the kinds of distorted thoughts or irrational thoughts that are common? All or none thinking, thinking that it's black or white, there's no gray. Being not able to see the subtleties of things and the nuances, and to think in more refined ways about things. We tend to need certainty. All right. So if we don't have that certainty, and we don't feel we have that certainty, all is lost. Well, being able to think in terms of probability, that there's how can I maximize the probabilities of my life? I don't have that control. Okay. But I can have influence and behave in ways that give me a chance for a better outcome. I want to be careful not to overgeneralize from negative things. We've talked about that a little bit before. Sometimes another distortion is filtering out positives for negatives, where it's almost like I'm a vacuum cleaner sucking up the negative, and it blocks out the positive. I don't see the positive anymore. It's hard to start to feel better if I don't see genuine positives. Jumping to conclusions without being able to see the evidence for it. Something bad happens, immediately I begin to catastrophize or awfulize. That's another way to generate anxiety and depression. I want to spot that. I want to be careful in focusing on negative qualities only of people, okay, and marginalizing people in that way. Another element is emotional reasoning. When we're upset, it's a very bad time to make big decisions. Why? Because under those conditions, I'm not thinking clearly. It's an emotional reasoning that I'm using. I've got to be able to get to a calmer state to be able to have a chance of examining my thoughts, looking for the evidence of what makes sense, and thinking more rationally and more clearly. I want to be careful of making demands. It's been called the tyranny of the shoulds. I should, I must, I ought. When I use those absolutes, I use those extremes, chances are I'm off into irrational thinking at that point. And I want to challenge that. And I don't want to also personalize. A bad thing happens, and sometimes we conclude, oh, it's because it's me. It's because, well, no. Bad things happen. There was a book, Bad Things Happen to Good People. Very often these things that are beyond our control, they happen to anybody. All right. I don't want to personalize that as somehow it's my curse or it's my inadequacy that is the basis for that. So, in sum, what I want to say, Roy, is we all want to try to be in our thinking good scientists. We want to look for the evidence of what we're thinking. And if the evidence is not there, we want to challenge it and we want to change it to be able to think in calmer and more rational ways, in ways where we can help ourselves. And it takes a little training, and that's a skill. And as you were saying before, one good way of getting to that is through writing, keeping a journal, keeping a diary, examining what I wrote. First of all, getting it out, that's typically therapeutic, but then being able to challenge it and say, okay, how can I think about this more clearly? And what can I write that's clearer, more rational, and more helpful? And it's a great exercise to do.
So thank you, Peter. I wanted to add something since this show is focusing on disasters. I did want to point out to the viewers that it would be really good if viewers have keep in mind and put in writing and develop and maybe even practice or implement some sort of a disaster plan that hinges on where they live, what are the kinds of end quote, disasters or difficulties that they're most likely to encounter, recognizing that you're not going to have, depending on where you live, you're not going to be exposed to everything. But certainly a disaster can happen, even a car accident or a medical disaster. And children need to know who to call, when to call, what phone numbers, how to do things. And in fact, if there is some sort of a flood or water shortage, like people who have to boil water. I mean, aren't they going to tell their children you can't drink the tap water? Or if you're taking a shower, you can't have the water in the shower go into your mouth because it's contaminated and could it contaminate your eyeballs? I mean, you need to know this. You need to know what it is in your area, problems that are there, and develop some disaster plan, not only for yourselves, for your families, certainly for children. Best to put it in writing, keep it in mind, and do a little bit of rehearsal so that you're talking about it. We've had a lot of horrific tragedies in schools. That should be part of it for parents who have children go to school. What happens if the school bus is late to picking you up? What happens if your child gets off at the wrong school bus stop? What happens if your child is subjected to bullying or something that happened with a teacher, another kid, or somebody on the school bus? Who do you talk about? Who do you tell? What complaints? What do you do about it? Do you know the name of the school bus company that drives your children to school? I've told patients, make sure you know the names, take a photo of the school bus, take a photo that shows the bus driver, try to get the name of the bus drivers as a regular, so you know, and look up the history of the bus company. Have there been complaints? What's going on? What are some of the issues in school? Yeah, I'm focusing on schools right now, obviously, because of what's happened in Uvalde. And I know a lot of kids, they don't want to go back to school. So obviously, that's not a natural disaster. That's a human-caused disaster. But still, my recommendation of having some sort of a strategy or disaster plan, I think, sticks. Anything to add to that? And then we'll go into the resources.
Yeah, relatedly, Roy, what I would say is right next to that disaster plan, have what I call a coping toolkit. All right. Going back to an earlier slide that you had posted, what are the things that help me to cope? And taking photos, relationships, watching TV, pets, listening to music. That's one of my specialties in what's in my toolkit. Reading, hobbies, cooking, taking online courses, all these kinds of things that I want to be aware and have them at my fingertips if I'm struggling in some way emotionally and I feel, what's my go-to in my coping toolkit that I can use that will help me to cope and help me with how I feel. And it might be different. On Tuesday, it might be one thing. On Friday, it might be something else. So it can change, but, we want the more tools we have in there that are useful to us, it allows us to do the job we want to do. It's the same concept with the coping toolkit.
Well, Peter, some of the things in my coping toolkit that I haven't used that I'm looking forward to. One, going out to a nice Greek restaurant with you. It'll be nice to do. Another that's on my list is to have a wonderful Spanish paella. I have not had a Spanish paella in a very long time.
Nice.
And nice Salvadoran pupusas in honor of Oscar, since he never sends me pupusas. So that's pretty much in my toolkit as yet unrealized aspirations.
Okay.
So, Don Oscar, por favor, el 18, we're going to go over some resources, and then we'll just wrap up with some final thoughts about the show. So, dear viewers, here, ya está. So here, contact information for me on the left, contact information for Peter on the right. New York State Psychological Association, I'm giving you a phone number and a website. They are the premier psychological association in New York. The umbrella parent is the American Psychological Association underneath that. And all the states have a psychological association that is a regional affiliate of APA. So if you're in another state, New Jersey, you have New Jersey Psychological Association, California Psychological Association, and so forth. Just go to internet and you'll get a hold of them. I've given you the information for APA. APA has wonderful, wonderful resources. If you go to the website, you'll see all sorts of educational information there for viewers. New York State also has that. Suffolk County is my regional association. They're a great little association also with wonderful resources. I've given you the phone number and website. Westchester Psychological Association, our president of New York State Psychological Association and other members are members of Westchester WPA. I've given you the source there, and I've also given you access to all of the regional associations affiliated with NISPA. Certainly, you go to APA, you get a lot of resources. You get other resources that are connected directly to disaster. Centers for Disease Control. There's many other places that you can get information on disasters and so forth. Puede sacar el slide. So, Peter, anything to add on resources? And if not, just summarizing key last few points and message to the viewers.
Only, Roy, that our world continues to change. Some things are wonderful, some things are dreadful and very challenging to deal with. But we are resilient people, and we have to remember that. We have to stay encouraged by that, and to know that we've, as humans have faced challenges for eons, and we will continue to face challenges, and we're better equipped now than ever to face them well and to survive the challenges and to move forward and thrive. So take heart. We'll get there. We'll get there and we'll be able to do it. I also want to thank you, Roy, for the wonderful service that you have continued to provide in terms of public education through this vehicle and other things that you've done. And most of all, I want to thank you for your friendship and our longstanding friendship. And I will see you at that Greek restaurant.
All right, you got it. Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much. Oscar, ¿algún saludo de despedida a los televidentes? Okay, so Oscar, in his inimitable style, is wishing you all a wonderful weekend, and again promising pupusas to the first 10 callers. I'm kidding. At any rate, to my viewers, I did want to say that I'm grateful to Peter for having been with me since August 30 of 2018, and we were friends prior to that. So certainly he's been with me with this project for 4 years now. To Terry Ravella, who I've known for 21 years now in connection to 9/11, thank you for your words and for being here on the show. To the viewers who've followed me on a regular basis and those who are new, I hope that it's interesting enough that you'll continue to follow. I did want to also say that to all viewers, just keep in mind that as much as one might be hopeful and or inclined to believe that COVID is under control, in some aspects it's getting controlled, but it's far from over. We have BA5, people are getting infected. There are other mutations already there that are being looked at. It ain't over. You need to be careful. You need to consider what you can do to protect yourself. With schools back in session now, you need to be aware of increasing traffic on the road. More traffic on the road means more accidents, means more instances of road rage. Unfortunately, it means more people driving under the influence of alcohol and or drugs. And it could be prescribed medication. You can be taking insomnia medication and it's putting you to sleep. You should not be driving under those conditions. You need to consider that increased exposure to other people because they've gone back to work or they are in a mask-free environment without distancing. You are exposing yourself to the potential risk of contamination. All you need is about 30 seconds exposure to BA5 to catch it. That's about all that you need. You've got a couple of other things around the corner, like I said, monkeypox, polio, West Niles. You're going to get West Niles from mosquitoes, so mask isn't going to help you. You need to be careful, obviously, about going out and, you go out in the early evening or late afternoon when the mosquitoes are out. Have insect repellent. Keep your children safe. Monitor them if they're going to school without masks. We're getting, notices now that you'll be in quarantine for 5 days if you don't have any symptoms. That's bare minimum. You need to know your child best and really know what to do and be aware of what you have to do to keep yourself and your children and family safe. It's not safe. There's a lot of issues. That doesn't mean that you cannot enjoy life. There's many things that we focused on. Take care, protect yourself, be careful. Keep an eye on neighbors. If you see neighbors that are needing help or they're not around, or if they, for some reason, are elderly and or they have some sort of handicapping condition, try to reach out and help them. Be aware of your community, the needs. Keep a close eye really on schools, places of religious service, especially that they're being hit by, unfortunately, by deranged individuals that are just out to create harm. So know your environment, try to stay safe. I have several other shows planned with other experts, other psychologist experts, mental health experts, and I'm bringing a couple of attorneys also to talk about some legal concepts as they interface with mental health. So that said, thank you all. I hope you stay safe. I hope that the show is a benefit for you. It's being recorded. Feel free to get a copy of the recording, take screenshots, and or call Peter or myself, or obviously stay in touch with other experts. Your best source of information is not it's not the internet, not social media. You need to rely on reliable sources of information. That said, gracias, Oscar. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Terry, and good night to everybody. And I will catch you in October. Or maybe the end of September. I'm not sure. End of September, end of October.